My gold digger stepmother demanded I give her my birthday car, so I told my dad everything. My stepmother moved in when I was 13 and immediately demanded I call her mom. When dad wasn't home, which was often, she'd discipline me for anything. Didn't wash dishes fast enough? Phone gone. Once I had a high fever and could barely stand. She thought I was faking, forced me to walk to school alone. I fainted in class and had to be hospitalized. When dad came home, she lied and said she'd tried to stop me from going. He believed her over me. The worst part was how she monopolized dad's time. Whenever he was home, she'd demand dates and trips, leaving me behind. I was too scared to speak up, watching them leave for restaurants and vacations while I sat home alone. At 16, I finally told dad everything. He didn't fully believe me, but started spending time with me. Fishing trips, business trips. My stepmother threw tantrums about how I didn't need him, but she did. She even said once I turned 18, the house would be hers, and I'd have to leave. Dad shut that down fast. On my 18th birthday, I thought dad was away on business again. Then the doorbell rang. He stood there with a huge cake, surprising me for the first time in years. "You being here is the best gift," I told him, nearly crying. "Hold on, there's more." He led me outside to a brand new Toyota. Not flashy, just reliable, exactly what I wanted. That's when my stepmother came storming out. "This is unfair. I need a car more than he does. Give me those keys right now." When we refused, she grabbed a rock and threw it at the windshield, cracking it. "I'll do it again unless you hand over those keys." Dad actually yelled at her, told her to get inside. That's when it hit me. She hadn't even wished me happy birthday. She only came out to steal my gift. While she stood there demanding my car, Dad just stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. When we were alone, I told him everything. The abuse when he wasn't home, the lies she told, how she only cared about his money. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. "I wanted you to be happy. Or maybe I was just scared." "She needs to go," I said. "You need to divorce her." Dad was quiet for a long moment, processing that the woman he married had been abusing his son for 5 years. "I'll consider it." But I saw his face. The way his jaw clenched. The way he looked at the cracked windshield. He wasn't considering anything. He'd already decided. That was yesterday. This morning, Dad called his lawyer. Told me to pack anything valuable from my room. Said we're staying at a hotel tonight while he handles things. He's having her served with papers today, at 3 p.m., at her favorite salon, where all her friends will be. "I want you there when I tell her," he said. "You deserve to see this." We're heading there now. She has no idea what's coming. No idea Dad's bank accounts are already frozen to her. No idea the house is in his name only. No idea her 5-year gold-digging scheme is about to end in the most public way possible. I'm sitting in the car watching her through the salon window, getting her nails done with Dad's credit card for the last time. In 10 minutes, everything changes. Update coming after the papers are served. Salon window, watching her laugh with her friends like nothing matters. Dad leans forward and taps Edison on the shoulder, and the process server nods and gets out of his car. My heart pounds as we follow him across the parking lot. The salon door chimes when we push through, and the receptionist's smile drops when she sees our faces. My stepmother glances up from her magazine, and her expression shifts from confusion to alarm in seconds. Edison steps forward and asks in a clear voice if she's Mrs. Stepmother's legal name, and when she nods slowly, he hands her the folder. The whole salon goes quiet as she tears it open and starts reading. Her face flushes red, then drains white, then flushes red again. She screams that this is impossible, that Dad would never do this, that I must have forged these papers somehow. Dad crosses his arms and tells her every word is real and she needs to find a lawyer. Layla tries to comfort her, but she shoves her friend away hard enough that Layla stumbles. The salon owner steps between us and threatens to call the police. Dad tells my stepmother she has 48 hours to get her stuff before the locks change. She switches tactics instantly, tears streaming down her face as she begs Dad to talk privately, saying they can fix this. Dad's voice could freeze water when he tells her she should have thought about consequences before throwing rocks at his son's car. Edison confirms she's been served and walks out while she's still sobbing. We head for the door as she screams that she'll take everything, that she'll make sure I never see a penny of his money, that she'll destroy us both. My hands shake as we get back in the car, but it's not fear anymore. It's adrenaline from watching her lose control in front of everyone. Dad squeezes my shoulder and says the hard part is just beginning. Back at the hotel, Dad disappears into a meeting with Nathaniel for over 2 hours while I sit in the lobby trying to process what happened. My phone starts buzzing with texts from numbers I don't know, all friends of hers calling me horrible names and saying I'm lying about everything. I block each one and try to focus on the fact that Dad chose me over her. When Nathaniel finally comes out, he explains that she'll probably fight everything, claims she deserves half of Dad's money even though she signed a prenup. He says we need to write down every instance of abuse I remember with specific dates and details. The thought of reliving 5 years makes my stomach hurt, but I know it's necessary. That night, Dad orders room service and we eat in silence until he apologizes for not believing me sooner. He says he was desperate for a partner after Mom died and ignored all the warning signs. I tell him I forgive him, but we both know one conversation doesn't rebuild 5 years of broken trust. The next morning, her lawyer contacts Nathaniel demanding an emergency hearing about the frozen bank accounts. Nathaniel expected this and has documentation ready proving the prenup is solid. Dad explains he protected his business assets before they married because his lawyer warned him to. I spend the afternoon in the hotel room writing everything down for Nathaniel. The fever incident where I collapsed at the school and got hospitalized. The times she took my phone for weeks because I didn't do dishes fast enough. How she made Dad take her on trips and left me home alone. Every word I type makes me angrier at myself for staying quiet so long. Dad gets a call from our neighbor saying my stepmother showed up with a moving truck, claiming Dad said she could take furniture. The neighbor wouldn't let her in and called the police when she tried to force past. Nathaniel files for a restraining order immediately. 2 days later, we're in court for the hearing, and I have to sit across from her for the first time since the salon. She's wearing conservative clothes and crying softly, playing victim perfectly. But when the judge asks about the rock incident, she can't deny it because the salon owner and 3 customers already gave statements. The judge grants the restraining order and says she can make 1 supervised visit to collect personal items only, no furniture or valuables. Her lawyer argues she needs money during the divorce. The judge orders Dad to pay $2,000 per month temporary support, way less than she spent before. Nathaniel brings in Victor to handle asset protection, and Victor explains that Dad's business accounts, investments, and the house are all protected by the prenup. She can only claim half the joint checking account, which has about $8,000. Her lawyer looks furious but can't do anything about it. The supervised visit happens 3 days later with a police officer present. She shows up with 2 friends and a lawyer and tries to take expensive artwork and Dad's collectibles, claiming they were gifts. The officer makes her stick to clothes and toiletries only. She leaves screaming threats about how her lawyer will destroy us. That night, I finally break down crying in the hotel room. Dad holds me while I sob out 5 years of fear and pain. He keeps saying he's sorry over and over, and I realize he's crying too. We stay up until 2 in the morning talking about Mom and how much we miss her and how my stepmother could never replace her. Nathaniel calls the next day with news that her lawyer is pushing for a full trial, claiming Dad emotionally abused her and demanding half of everything, including his business. Victor promises the prenup will hold, but warns this could take months. Dad tells me we might stay in the hotel for a while, and I say that's fine as long as we're together. Roxana, the forensic accountant, starts going through 5 years of bank statements and credit card records. Within a week, she finds over $200,000 in charges to luxury stores, spas, and restaurants. Dad's face goes pale when he sees the numbers because he never realized how much she was spending. Her lawyer tries a new strategy, claiming she gave up her career to be a homemaker and deserves money for her sacrifices. Nathaniel produces evidence that she never had a career, was unemployed when she met Dad, and spent her days shopping and getting beauty treatments. The lawyer drops that argument fast. 3 weeks pass with us living in the hotel and going through legal meetings, and my stepmother starts posting on social media. The first post shows up on a Wednesday morning when I'm scrolling through my phone. She's crying in the photo with mascara running down her face, and the caption talks about narcissistic men who abandon their wives. Within hours, her friends share it everywhere. My phone starts buzzing with messages from numbers I don't know. The messages call me a liar and say I'm ruining an innocent woman's life. Some of them threaten me, saying I'll get what's coming to me. I block each number, but more keep appearing. Dad sees me staring at my phone and asks what's wrong, so I show him the post and all the messages. His face goes red and he starts typing something on his phone, probably a response, but then he stops and calls Nathaniel instead. Nathaniel tells us to stay completely off social media and not respond to anything. He says my stepmother is digging her own grave, and we just need to let her keep posting. Dad argues that people are threatening his son and something needs to be done, but Nathaniel insists that responding will only make things worse. Sure enough, 2 days later, my stepmother posts again, this time claiming Dad never let her work and controlled all the money. The problem is her lawyer already told the court she chose not to work because she preferred being a homemaker. Victor screenshots the post and the court documents side by side, showing the contradiction. Nathaniel adds everything to our evidence file and says, this helps our case more than it hurts us. My stepmother keeps posting for another week, each message more dramatic than the last, until her lawyer probably tells her to stop because the posts suddenly disappear. Dad's insurance covers therapy sessions, so he sets up an appointment for me with someone downtown. The therapist's office is small and comfortable with soft chairs and dim lighting. I sit down and don't know where to start, so the therapist asks me to describe what happened. I tell her about the 5 years of living with my stepmother, about being scared all the time, about wanting Dad to be happy even though I was miserable. The therapist listens without interrupting, and then explains that what my stepmother did counts as emotional abuse and neglect. She says my guilt about not speaking up sooner is normal, but I shouldn't blame myself for being scared. We spend the rest of the session talking about anxiety, and she teaches me breathing exercises for when I start panicking. I leave feeling lighter than I have in weeks, like maybe talking about this stuff actually helps. A month after the salon incident, we have a deposition scheduled at Nathaniel's office. I have to sit in a conference room and answer questions from my stepmother's lawyer while a court reporter types everything down. The The lawyer is older with gray hair and glasses, and he starts out friendly, but his questions get harder. He asks why I never called Child Protective Services if things were so bad. He asks why I never told a teacher or another adult. He makes it sound like I'm making everything up or exaggerating to help Dad in the divorce. I try to explain that I was scared and wanted Dad to be happy, but my voice starts shaking. The lawyer keeps pushing, asking if I have any proof of the abuse besides my word. That's when I start crying, not because I want to, but because I can't stop thinking about all those years of being alone and scared. The lawyer backs off immediately and says he has no further questions. Nathaniel walks me out after and says I did fine, that showing real emotion actually helps our case because it proves I'm telling the truth. My stepmother's deposition happens the following week, and I don't have to be there, but Nathaniel calls afterward to tell us how it went. He sounds almost happy when he says she contradicted herself at least 15 times. First, she claimed she was always kind to me and never disciplined me harshly. Then the lawyer asked about taking my phone away, and she admitted she did it, but said it was justified because I wasn't doing chores properly. Then she denied throwing the rock at my car windshield, but when they showed her the police report and witness statements, she changed her story and said she was just upset and didn't mean to damage anything. Nathaniel says her lawyer looked miserable by the end because there's no way to fix that many contradictions. Dad actually laughs when he hears this, the first time I've heard him laugh in weeks. Roxana finishes going through all the financial records and asks for a meeting to present her findings. We meet at Nathaniel's office, and Roxana spreads papers across the conference table. She's organized everything into categories with highlighted totals. The report shows my stepmother spent an average of $3,000 per month on personal expenses for 5 years. Roxana points to itemized lists showing designer handbags, jewelry, spa treatments, expensive dinners at restaurants Dad never went to. There are charges for clothes, shoes, makeup, hair appointments, nail appointments, and trips to luxury stores. Dad's face goes pale as he looks at the numbers, and he keeps saying he never realized how much she was spending. The total comes to over $180,000 in 5 years, not counting the regular household expenses. Roxana explains that this evidence proves my stepmother married Dad for financial gain, which supports the prenup's validity. Dad looks sick and says he can't believe he was so blind. My stepmother's lawyer sends a settlement offer through Nathaniel demanding $100,000, the car she was driving, and continued health insurance for 2 years. The offer arrives by email, and Nathaniel reads it out loud to us in his office. When he finishes, he actually laughs and says this is ridiculous given the prenup terms. Dad asks what we should counter with, and Nathaniel suggests $20,000, no car, and 6 months insurance. Victor agrees this is more than fair considering she signed away rights to Dad's assets. Nathaniel sends the counteroffer that same day. My stepmother's lawyer calls back within hours saying we're being unreasonable and threatening to drag this case out for years if we don't negotiate properly. Nathaniel tells him to do whatever he thinks is best, but the prenup won't change, and neither will our offer. The lawyer hangs up angry. I finish my last papers for senior year online classes and submit everything through the school website. The confirmation email says I've officially graduated high school. I show Dad, and he immediately orders a cake from the hotel restaurant. We eat it in our hotel room that night. Just the two of us, and Dad makes a speech about how proud he is that I finished school despite everything happening. He promises that by the time I start college in the fall, we'll be back in our house and this whole nightmare will be over. I want to believe him, but part of me worries the divorce will drag on forever. Still, graduating feels like an accomplishment. Like I managed to do something normal even though my life has been chaos for months. The hotel phone rings early one morning and Dad answers it. His face changes as he listens, going from confused to angry in seconds. He hangs up and tells me that was my stepmother's sister calling to beg him to be reasonable. Apparently my stepmother has nowhere to go and no money to live on. Dad picks up his cell phone and calls the sister back, putting it on speaker so I can hear. He reminds her that the court ordered temporary support of $2,000 per month, which is more than enough to rent an apartment and buy groceries. The sister argues that her sister needs more, that she's used to a certain lifestyle. Dad's voice goes cold when he says her sister should have thought about her future before she spent 5 years abusing his son. The sister tries to argue, but Dad hangs up. Nathaniel calls an hour later saying the sister's phone call violated the restraining order by proxy, and he's documenting it in case we need it later. Nathaniel files a motion to expedite the divorce based on the prenup's clear language and lack of contested assets. He explains that most divorces take months or even years, but ours should be faster because everything is already spelled out in the prenup. The judge reviews the motion and agrees to schedule a hearing in 2 weeks instead of months from now. My stepmother's lawyer files an objection trying to delay, claiming they need more time to prepare their case. The judge denies the request and says 2 weeks is plenty of time given the straightforward nature of the prenup. Nathaniel calls to tell us the good news, and Dad actually smiles for the first time in days. 2 more weeks and this could all be over. I start texting some old friends from the school, people I kind of stopped hanging out with after my stepmother made everything so complicated. Jake responds first, says he's been wondering how I've been doing. We meet up at this coffee shop downtown, and I tell him everything that's been happening. He just sits there with his mouth open, shaking his head. He says he always thought something was wrong at my house, but didn't know how to ask about it. Sarah messages me back too, and we meet up the next day. She admits she noticed I stopped coming to group hangouts and parties junior year. When I explain why, she gets really quiet and then says she wishes she'd pushed harder to stay in touch. It feels amazing to have people my age who actually care about what I went through. We make plans to hang out more before I leave for college, and for the first time in years, I feel like I might actually have a normal social life again. Dad notices I'm texting more and smiling at my phone. He asks if I'm reconnecting with friends, and I tell him yes. He looks relieved, like maybe he's not the only person who can support me anymore. A few days later, Dad brings home a stack of apartment listings near my college campus. We spread them out on the hotel room bed and start looking through photos and descriptions. Some are way too expensive, some are in sketchy neighborhoods, but a few look perfect. Dad circles 3 that he thinks are safe and nice, all within walking distance of campus. We drive out there the following weekend to tour them. The first one smells weird and has stains on the carpet. The second one is nice, but the landlord gives me bad vibes. The third one is perfect, a small 1-bedroom with big windows and a kitchen that actually has counter space. Dad asks about the lease terms and pulls out his checkbook right there. He writes a check for the first and last month's rent plus security deposit before I can even process what's happening. The landlord says I can move in August 1st, right before classes start. On the drive back, Dad tells me he wants me to focus completely on the school and not worry about money. He says he's setting up a monthly deposit into my account to cover food and expenses. I try to argue, but he cuts me off and says this is what he should have been doing all along. I realize he's trying to make up for 5 years of not protecting me from my stepmother. Part of me wants to say he doesn't need to, but another part of me knows we both need this. The day of the hearing finally arrives and we get to the courthouse at 8 in the morning. Nathaniel meets us outside with his briefcase and a confident expression. We go through security and find the right courtroom. My stepmother is already there with her lawyer, sitting at the opposite table. She won't look at us. The judge comes in and everyone stands. For the next 6 hours, lawyers argue back and forth about whether the prenup is valid. My stepmother's lawyer claims she signed it under duress, that she didn't understand what she was agreeing to, that Dad pressured her. Nathaniel stays calm through all of it. When it's his turn, he pulls out a laptop and plays a video recording of the prenup signing. The video shows my stepmother sitting at a table with Dad and 2 lawyers. One of the lawyers reads through every single term out loud while my stepmother nods. At the end, she clearly states that she understands everything and agrees to all the terms. Her signature is right there on camera. The judge watches the whole thing without any expression. My stepmother's lawyer tries to argue that the video doesn't prove anything, but even he sounds defeated. Nathaniel also shows bank statements proving Dad's assets were always separate, that my stepmother never contributed financially to anything. The judge asks a few questions, and then announces a 2-hour recess to review all the documents and evidence. We stand in the courthouse hallway during the recess. My stepmother stands across from us near the water fountain, glaring at us with pure hatred. Dad reaches over and takes my hand like I'm still a little kid. I don't pull away. Nathaniel leans against the wall looking through his phone, completely relaxed. He tells us the video recording is solid evidence and the prenup should hold up, but then he warns us that judges can be unpredictable sometimes, that we shouldn't assume anything until we hear the ruling. I watch my stepmother whispering intensely with her lawyer. He keeps shaking his head like he's trying to explain something she doesn't want to hear. Other people walk past us, lawyers and defendants and families, all dealing with their own problems. A bailiff comes out and tells us the judge is ready. We file back into the courtroom and take our seats. The judge starts talking and I hold my breath. He says he's reviewed all the evidence, including the video recording. He rules that the prenup is valid and fully enforceable. My stepmother makes this sound like a wounded animal, this horrible wail that echoes through the courtroom. Her lawyer grabs her arm as she tries to stand up. She's screaming that it's not fair, that the judge is wrong, that she's being robbed. The judge bangs his gavel and orders her to control herself, or she'll be held in contempt of court. Her lawyer physically pulls her back down into her chair and puts his hand over her mouth. The judge stares at her with this cold expression until she finally goes quiet. Then he continues reading his decision. Every asset Dad owned before the marriage remains his property. Every asset acquired during the marriage remains his property per the prenup terms. My stepmother is entitled to nothing except what was explicitly agreed to in the prenup. The judge grants Dad's divorce petition right there. He schedules a final settlement hearing for 2 weeks from now to work out the exact terms of what my stepmother gets. My stepmother starts sobbing loudly, these huge, gasping sobs that sound fake. She's screaming between sobs about how this isn't fair, how she gave Dad the best years of her life. The judge's voice goes even colder when he reminds her that she was only married for 5 years and the prenup was her choice to sign. He says if she can't control herself, he'll have the bailiff remove her from the courtroom. Her lawyer whispers something urgent in her ear, and she finally shuts up, just sitting there crying into her hands. Nathaniel is writing notes calmly. Dad squeezes my hand so hard it almost hurts. The judge dismisses us, and we stand up to leave. My stepmother won't even look at us now, just keeps her face buried in her hands while her lawyer packs up his briefcase. We leave the courthouse and Dad asks where I want to go. I tell him my favorite restaurant, this Italian place we used to go to before my stepmother moved in. We haven't been there in probably 4 years. Dad drives us there and we get a table by the window. Over plates of pasta and breadsticks, Dad tells me about his plan to sell the house. He says it has too many bad memories now, too many years of her living there and making everyone miserable. He wants us to find a new place together, somewhere that's just ours with no trace of her. Maybe something smaller and easier to maintain. Maybe closer to his office so he doesn't have to travel as much. I tell him I'd like that starting fresh sounds good. We talk about what kind of place we'd want, how many bedrooms, whether we want a yard. It feels normal and good, just Dad and me planning our future without her poisoning everything. 3 days later, Dad calls me from his office sounding furious. My stepmother showed up in the parking lot and started screaming at him in front of his coworkers. She was yelling about how he ruined her life, how he's a terrible person, how she's going to make him pay. Building security came out and tried to get her to leave, but she wouldn't go. She kept screaming and crying and causing a scene. Security called the police and they arrested her right there in the parking lot. Dad says she was still screaming as they put her in the police car. The charge is violation of a court order because of the restraining order. She has to spend the night in jail until her lawyer can bail her out in the morning. Dad sounds tired and angry at the same time. He says he can't believe she's this stupid, that she just made everything worse for herself. Nathaniel calls the next morning with an update. He's using the arrest to argue for a harsher settlement at the final hearing. He plans to point out her pattern of volatile behavior and her complete inability to respect court orders. He says the judge will definitely consider it when deciding what she gets. He also mentions that my stepmother's lawyer looked completely defeated during their last phone call. The lawyer is apparently pushing her hard to accept whatever settlement we offer because he knows she has no chance of getting anything better. Nathaniel sounds almost cheerful when he talks about how badly her case is going. He says 2 more weeks and this whole nightmare should be completely over. That evening, Dad sits me down at the hotel room desk and asks if I want to be present at the final settlement hearing. He says I don't have to be there if it's too hard, that I can wait at the hotel and he'll tell me everything afterwards. I think about it for maybe 5 seconds before telling him I want to be there for all of it. I need to see this through to the very end. Need to watch her lose everything she thought she'd get from us. Dad looks at me with this expression that's half proud and half sad. He says I'm braver than he ever was, that most kids would want to stay as far away as possible. I tell him it's not about being brave, it's about finally seeing justice happen after 5 years of her getting away with everything. He nods slowly and says he understands. We sit there in silence for a while, both of us thinking about what the final hearing will be like, both of us ready for this to finally be over. The night before the final hearing, Dad's phone rings around 8 p.m. while we're eating takeout Chinese food in the hotel room. He looks at the screen and his whole body goes tense when he sees it's Nathaniel calling this late. He answers on speaker so I can hear everything, and Nathaniel's voice comes through sounding almost excited. My stepmother's lawyer called him an hour ago with a new settlement offer, completely different from all their previous demands. She's willing to accept exactly what we offered weeks ago, the $20,000, 6 months of health insurance and nothing else. No house, no car, no alimony, no splitting of Dad's business assets. Nathaniel explains that her lawyer probably finally got through to her about how badly she was losing, how the judge already ruled against her on everything important. He says we should accept it immediately to avoid any chance of her changing her mind or filing appeals that could drag this out for months longer. Dad looks at me across the small hotel room table and asks what I think, actually asking my opinion on something this important. I tell him to take it, to end this now before she finds some new way to make our lives harder. Dad agrees and tells Nathaniel to accept the settlement and prepare the final paperwork for tomorrow's hearing. The next morning we get dressed in the nicest clothes we packed, the same suits we wore to the first hearings weeks ago. Dad's hands shake a little while he ties his tie in the bathroom mirror, and I realize he's nervous about actually seeing this end. We drive to the courthouse in silence, both of us thinking about how this is supposed to be the last time we have to do this. The parking lot feels familiar now after all these court visits, and we know exactly which entrance to use and where the courtroom is located. Nathaniel meets us outside with his briefcase and 2 copies of the settlement agreement, already printed and ready for signatures. He walks us through what's going to happen, how the judge will review everything, and ask my stepmother directly if she agrees to all the terms. We go inside and take our usual seats at the plaintiff's table, and I look across the courtroom to where my stepmother sits with her lawyer. She looks completely different from the last time I saw her. No makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a plain dress instead of her usual expensive outfits. She won't look at us at all, just keeps her eyes fixed on the table in front of her while her lawyer arranges papers. Her whole posture screams defeat, shoulders slumped forward, hands folded in her lap like she's trying to make herself smaller. The judge enters and we all stand, then sit back down when he tells us to. He puts on his reading glasses and starts going through the settlement agreement page by page, taking his time to review every detail. The courtroom is completely quiet, except for the sound of papers rustling as he flips through the document. After what feels like forever, he looks up and addresses my stepmother directly, asking if she understands that she's agreeing to accept $20,000 and 6 months health insurance as her complete share of the marital assets. Her lawyer has to nudge her shoulder to get her to respond, and when she finally speaks, her voice comes out so quiet that the judge has to ask her to repeat herself louder. She says yes in a slightly louder voice that still sounds defeated and small. The judge asks if anyone forced her to accept these terms, or if she's signing under any kind of pressure or threat. She shakes her head and says no, that this is her choice. The judge nods and declares that the marriage between her and Dad is officially dissolved as of this moment, and he orders both parties to sign the final documents right now in the courtroom. A court clerk brings the papers to our table first, and Dad signs his name on every marked line with firm, confident strokes. Then the clerk takes the documents to my stepmother's table, and I watch her hand shake as she picks up the pen and signs her name. Just like that, it's actually over. 5 years of abuse, manipulation, lies, and control ended with our signatures on legal documents. The judge thanks everyone for their time and dismisses us, and my stepmother's lawyer immediately starts packing up his briefcase like he can't wait to leave. My stepmother stands up slowly and walks toward the exit on the opposite side of the courtroom from where we're sitting. I watch her back as she pushes through the doors and disappears into the hallway, and I know I'm never going to see her again. Dad puts his hand on my shoulder and squeezes, and I realize we're both just standing there staring at the empty doorway she left through. Nathaniel shakes Dad's hand and congratulates us, saying he'll file all the final paperwork with the court this afternoon and mail us copies for our records. Dad thanks him for everything he did over the past months, and Nathaniel says it was one of the easier cases he's handled because the prenup was so solid. We leave the courthouse and walk to the parking lot in the bright morning sunshine, and Dad stops next to the car and just stands there for a minute, breathing deeply. He looks at me and says, "We can finally go home, that the locksmith already changed all the locks yesterday, and a cleaning service went through the whole house last night." He tells me he wants to erase every trace of her from our lives, start completely fresh like she was never there. We drive back to the hotel and pack up all our stuff, which isn't much after living there for weeks. I zip up my suitcase and look around the room one last time, thinking about all the conversations Dad and I had here while we waited for the divorce to finalize. Walking back into our house feels weird and familiar at the same time, like visiting a place I used to know really well but haven't seen in years. Dad wasn't kidding about erasing her presence. Every single photo of her is gone from the walls, leaving rectangular patches of slightly different colored paint where the frames used to hang. All her decorative items disappeared from the shelves and tables, the fancy vases and sculptures she bought with Dad's money. The place looks empty but clean, like we're starting fresh in a space that used to feel poisoned by her presence. Dad walks through every room checking that the cleaning service did their job properly, and I follow him seeing the house through new eyes. We end up in the living room, and Dad suggests ordering pizza for dinner, and I realize she never would have allowed us to eat pizza in the living room because she said it was too messy. We order 2 large pizzas with all our favorite toppings and eat them sitting on the couch watching a movie, dropping crumbs on the cushions and not caring at all. That weekend, Dad and I decide to paint my room a color I actually like instead of the boring beige she insisted on for every room in the house. We go to the hardware store, and I pick out a blue that reminds me of the ocean, something bright and alive instead of neutral and dead. We spend Saturday afternoon covering my furniture with old sheets and taping off the edges of the walls, then rolling paint onto the walls while music blasts from Dad's phone. We make a complete mess, getting paint on our clothes and hands, laughing when Dad accidentally steps in the paint tray and leaves blue footprints across the drop cloth. It feels good to laugh like this, to do something normal and fun without worrying about her getting angry or making some comment about how we're doing it wrong. Hugo Lake from the hotel stops by in the afternoon with a housewarming gift, a nice set of kitchen knives that he says every home needs. He and Dad became friendly during our stay, talking in the hotel lobby most evenings while I did homework. Hugo looks around the house and comments on how nice and clean everything looks, and Dad shows him my half-painted room. They talk for a while about paint colors and home improvement projects while I keep rolling blue paint onto the walls. I start working part-time at Dad's office for the summer, learning about his business and spending time with him during the day. His office is downtown in a building with lots of other small businesses, and everyone there seems nice when Dad introduces me around. I mostly do filing and data entry, boring stuff that doesn't require much training, but it feels good to be doing something productive instead of sitting at home. Dad's employees are kind to me, bringing me coffee in the mornings and inviting me to lunch with them. Several of them mention they never liked my stepmother, that she was rude and demanding whenever she visited the office. One woman tells me my stepmother once made her cry by yelling at her about some minor scheduling issue, and she's glad Dad finally got rid of her. I realize other people saw through her fake nice act even when Dad couldn't, that she showed her true personality to people she thought didn't matter. 2 months after the divorce gets finalized, Dad receives a phone call from my stepmother's sister while we're eating breakfast. I can only hear Dad's side of the conversation, but I gather that the sister is calling to let us know my stepmother moved to another state and started over somewhere new. The sister apologizes for her behavior during the marriage, admitting she knew her sister had serious problems, but hoped marriage would somehow fix her. Dad listens politely and thanks her for the information, then says he hopes my stepmother gets the help she needs. After he hangs up, Dad tells me the whole conversation, and we both sit there quietly thinking about how she's gone and starting a new life somewhere far away. Part of me feels relieved knowing she's not nearby anymore, but another part feels sad that she wasted 5 years of our lives and learned nothing from it. I get my acceptance letter to college with a partial scholarship on a Tuesday afternoon, and I run downstairs to show Dad immediately. He reads the letter twice, then looks up at me with tears in his eyes, actual happy tears running down his face. He pulls me into a tight hug and tells me Mom would be so proud of me, that he's proud of me too for getting through everything and still succeeding. We spend the evening looking at the college website together, reading about the programs and campus life, getting excited about this next chapter. The next weekend, we go shopping for dorm supplies, walking through the big box store, filling a cart with sheets, towels, desk organizers, and all the random stuff the college packing list says I need. Dad insists on buying everything, saying he wants me to have a good setup and focus on my classes instead of worrying about money. We load everything into his car and drive home, talking about my future like normal fathers and sons do, planning my move and discussing what classes I should take first semester. I call the auto glass shop on Monday morning and schedule the windshield replacement for Tuesday afternoon. Dad offers to take time off work to drive me there, but I tell him I can handle it myself since the shop is only 20 minutes away. The repair takes about 2 hours, and when the technician finishes installing the new glass, he walks me out to the parking lot where my Toyota sits gleaming under the afternoon sun. Dad must have called ahead because the entire car has been detailed, inside and out, with the seats shampooed and the dashboard polished until it shines. I run my hand along the hood and feel how smooth the paint is after they waxed it. Dad texts me asking how it looks, and I send him a photo with a message saying it's perfect. He responds immediately, telling me it's a real fresh start for both the car and us, and I sit in the driver's seat for a minute just taking that in. I roll down all 4 windows and pull out of the parking lot, driving through town with warm air rushing through the car. For the first time in 5 years, I feel completely free, like I can go anywhere without worrying about her tracking my location or demanding to know where I've been. I drive past my old school, past the mall where she used to drag Dad shopping, past the restaurant where they'd go for date nights while I stayed home alone. None of it hurts anymore because those places belong to a different life, one I don't have to live in anymore. 3 weeks later, Dad sits me down after dinner and tells me he's thinking about dating again. Very casually. Nothing serious. He says he wants my opinion before he brings anyone around the house because my comfort matters more than his social life. I appreciate that he's being careful and actually considering my feelings instead of just doing whatever he wants. He shows me a dating app on his phone, and we scroll through profiles together, which feels weird at first, but then kind of funny. The women he meets over the next month are nice and normal. Nothing like my stepmother. One works as a nurse and talks about her garden. Another teaches elementary school and brings homemade cookies when she stops by to meet me. They're polite and ask me questions about college plans and my interests, treating me like an actual person instead of an obstacle. None of them last more than a few dates because Dad says he's not ready for anything serious yet, and I'm relieved he's taking his time instead of rushing into another mistake. One Saturday morning in early July, Dad and I sit on the back porch drinking coffee, and he brings up everything that happened with my stepmother. He promises he'll never ignore warning signs again, that he learned his lesson about putting his own loneliness ahead of my safety. He admits he was desperate after Mom died, so desperate for companionship that he ignored every red flag my stepmother showed him. I tell him I understand why he did it, that grief makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. We talk about Mom for a while, sharing memories I'd almost forgotten, and Dad gets tears in his eyes when I mention how she used to make pancakes shaped like animals on Sunday mornings. He says we both learned from this experience, him to be more careful and me to speak up when something's wrong. I want to believe we'll both do better next time, that this nightmare taught us something useful instead of just leaving scars. My therapy session the following Tuesday goes better than expected, and my therapist tells me I'm making excellent progress with processing the trauma. She says we can reduce sessions to once a month instead of weekly because I've developed healthy coping mechanisms and learned to recognize my anxiety triggers. The nightmares about my stepmother have mostly stopped, only coming back occasionally when I'm stressed about something else. I've learned to notice when my chest gets tight and my breathing speeds up, and I know how to calm myself down before the panic takes over completely. My therapist gives me worksheets to practice at home and reminds me I can always call if I need an emergency session. Walking out of her office, I feel lighter than I have in months, like maybe I'm actually healing instead of just surviving. Dad changes his mind about selling the house in mid-July after we spend weeks making it ours again with new paint, new furniture, and new memories that don't include her. He says every room feels different now, cleaner somehow, and he doesn't want to leave the place where Mom lived just because my stepmother tried to ruin it. We decide to host a small barbecue and invite our neighbors and some people from Dad's office. I spend Saturday morning cleaning the grill and setting up folding chairs in the backyard while Dad runs to the grocery store for burgers and hot dogs. About 15 people show up, and everyone comments on how happy we both seem, how much more relaxed Dad looks compared to a year ago. One of his coworkers pulls me aside and says she's glad that woman is gone because Dad was miserable the entire time he was married to her. Our neighbor from 2 houses down mentions he never liked my stepmother, that she was rude whenever he tried to make conversation. I realize other people saw through her fake nice act even when Dad couldn't, and that makes me feel less crazy for hating her all those years. August arrives faster than I expected, and suddenly I'm 3 months past the divorce and preparing to leave for college. Dad handles it better than I thought he would, staying calm when we shop for dorm supplies and talking about my class schedule without getting emotional. We've grown closer through everything that happened, spending evenings watching movies together and going to baseball games on weekends. Our relationship feels solid now, built on honesty instead of secrets and fear. Dad promises to visit every other weekend and call every single day, and I believe him because he's kept every promise he's made since the divorce. We mark my move-in date on the kitchen calendar and start counting down the days, both excited and nervous about this next chapter. My last night before college, Dad comes into my room carrying a leather-bound photo album I've never seen before. He sits on my bed and opens it to reveal pictures of Mom, him, and me from before she died, back when I was little and our family was happy. He says he wants me to remember that our family was full of love before my stepmother came along, that those 5 years don't define who we are. We look through the album together and Dad tells me stories about each photo. There's one of Mom holding me as a baby in the hospital, her face exhausted but glowing. Another shows the three of us at the beach when I was maybe 4, building a sandcastle that's half collapsed. Dad points to a picture of Mom laughing at something off camera and says that's how he wants me to remember her, full of joy and life. We sit there for over an hour, crying and laughing and sharing memories until my eyes hurt from the tears. Dad closes the album and hands it to me, telling me to take it to college so I always have them with me. Move-in day arrives on a humid Thursday in late August, and Dad helps me load everything into his car at 6 in the morning. The drive to campus takes 3 hours, and we spend most of it talking about classes and campus life, and all the opportunities waiting for me. Dad carries the heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs to my dorm room, while I handle the lighter stuff, and we spend the afternoon setting everything up. My roommate shows up around 2 with his parents, and they seem nice enough, friendly and excited about the school year. Dad slips me an envelope before leaving, hugging me tight and telling me he's proud of me. After he drives away, I open the envelope to find a letter and a check for $2,000 marked emergency expenses only. The letter is 2 pages long, written in Dad's messy handwriting, telling me how proud he is of the man I'm becoming. He writes that I survived something that would have broken most people, that my strength and resilience inspire him to be better. The last line says Mom would be so proud of me, and I have to sit down on my bed because my legs feel weak. I settle into college life faster than expected, making friends in my classes and joining a study group for calculus. Every night at 9, I call Dad like he asked, telling him about my professors and the weird guy down the hall who plays guitar at midnight. Dad shares updates about work and his casual dating life, mentioning he went to dinner with the elementary school teacher again. Our conversations are easy and honest, nothing like the tense silences when my stepmother lived with us. We laugh about stupid things and talk seriously about important things, and I realize this is what a healthy father-son relationship looks like. Sometimes Dad asks if I'm eating enough or sleeping well, and I know he's trying to make up for the years he didn't notice I was suffering. I let him worry because it means he cares, and that's all I ever wanted. 2 months into fall semester, Dad calls me on a Tuesday night sounding nervous and excited at the same time. He tells me he met someone named Isabel Funk, who works as a teacher and has her own kids from a previous marriage. He's taking it very slow and being completely transparent with me about the relationship, asking if I'm okay with him seeing someone seriously. I tell him I trust his judgment now, and I want him to be happy. Dad promises to introduce us over Thanksgiving break after they've been dating for a few months. When I finally meet Isabel in November, she's genuinely kind, asking me questions about college and listening to my answers like she actually cares. She brings her 2 kids, both younger than me, and they're polite and well-behaved. Isabel thanks me for giving her a chance and says she knows Dad and I have been through a lot together. Watching Dad with her, I see how different he acts compared to how he was with my stepmother. He's relaxed and himself, not trying to please her or walking on eggshells. Isabel treats me like family instead of competition, and that's when I know she's nothing like my stepmother at all. Thanksgiving break arrives and I drive home from campus with my stomach doing nervous flips because I haven't been back in 3 months. The house looks exactly the same from the outside, but when I walk through the door, Dad hugs me tight and whispers that he started seeing a therapist twice a week to work through everything. We sit at the kitchen table with coffee, and he tells me about the sessions, how his therapist is helping him understand why he was ignored, the warning signs for so long, and how to forgive himself for not protecting me sooner. I tell him about my own therapy sessions at the school, and how my therapist says healing doesn't follow a straight line, that some days are better than others, and that's completely normal. Dad looks relieved when I say that because he admits he still has days where the guilt hits him, so hard he can barely function at work. We talk for 2 hours about our progress and our setbacks, about how we're both doing better but still struggling sometimes. He tells me he wakes up some mornings angry at himself for wasting 5 years being blind, and I tell him I still have nightmares about my stepmother showing up at my dorm room. The conversation feels raw and honest in a way our talks never were before, and I realize we're finally learning how to be real with each other. Isabel arrives the next day with her 2 kids and a massive turkey that barely fits in our oven. Her daughter is 7 and keeps asking me questions about college, while her son, who's 10, wants to show me his Pokemon card collection. The house fills with noise and laughter and the smell of food cooking, and it's so different from the silent, tense holidays with my stepmother that I almost don't know how to act. Isabel doesn't try to take over or control everything like my stepmother did, instead asking Dad and me what we want to do, and actually listening to our answers. We all cook together, bumping into each other in the kitchen and making a mess that nobody gets upset about. During dinner, Isabel's kids tell silly stories and Dad laughs harder than I've heard him laugh in years. I watch him with Isabel and see how relaxed he is, how he doesn't have to walk on eggshells or worry about saying the wrong thing. Isabel treats me like family instead of competition, asking about my classes and my friends without any hidden agenda. After dinner, we play board games and Isabel's son beats all of us at Monopoly. Watching Dad smile at Isabel across the table, I realize I'm genuinely happy for him and that feels huge. We're both learning what healthy relationships actually look like, how people are supposed to treat each other with kindness and respect instead of manipulation and control. Winter break comes faster than expected, and Dad surprises me by announcing we're taking a road trip to visit graduate schools, even though I'm only a freshman. He says he wants to plan ahead and show me what options exist for my future. We spend a week driving to different campuses, touring facilities, and talking to professors about their programs. During the long drives between cities, we have deep conversations about everything that happened with my stepmother and how far we've both come since that day at the salon. Dad admits he was scared he'd lost me completely during those 5 years, that he'd wake up one day and I'd be gone and never speak to him again. He tells me he's grateful I gave him another chance to be a real father instead of just writing him off. I tell him I'm glad he finally opened his eyes and chose me over her, that it means everything to know he believes me now. We talk about my future plans and his future with Isabel, about how neither of us knows exactly where we're headed, but we're both moving forward instead of staying stuck in the past. He asks if I'm okay with Isabel being in his life, and I say yes without hesitation, because I can see she makes him happy in a way my stepmother never did. We visit 5 different schools, and Dad takes notes about each program like he's the one applying, asking questions about research opportunities and career prospects. On the drive home, he tells me he's proud of the person I'm becoming, and that Mom would be proud too. Spring semester starts in 2 days, and I'm packing up my car in the driveway when Dad and Isabel come out to say goodbye. Isabel hugs me and tells me to call if I need anything, that she's here for both of us now. Dad helps me load the last box and stands there looking like he wants to say something important, but doesn't know how. I tell him I'll be fine and he nods, but his eyes are watery. Isabel takes his hand and they stand together waving as I back out of the driveway, and I feel something shift inside me that I can't quite name. We survived something that destroys most families, something that could have left us broken and angry at each other forever. Instead, we came out on the other side stronger and more honest than we were before. Life isn't perfect, and we both still have therapy appointments and hard days when the past creeps back in. But we're doing the work together, having the difficult conversations, and showing up for each other in ways we never did before. I drive back to campus thinking about how different everything is now compared to a year ago when my stepmother was still in our lives. The future feels open and possible instead of scary and uncertain, and I realize that's what hope actually feels like.